Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSPmagazine. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hitrustalliance.net. CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impact of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
Modern application development needs modern application security. With our award-winning application security testing solutions, Checkmarx enables developers to securely accelerate their work. Learn more at checkmarx.com. AppViewX is trusted by the world's leading global organizations to reduce risk, ensure compliance, and increase visibility through machine identity management and application infrastructure security and orchestration. Learn more at appviewx.com.
Marco.
Sean.
You know what I go to RSA for?
For the food.
Food, exactly. Sometimes the occasional beverage to wash the food down. But
only when necessary.
I go to the conference for food.
There you go. I go to when I go, which has been a little while now. I go to meet people and to catch up with them. Not much for the presentation. You can always look those online. Nowadays they're recorded, they're there, but to meet people. And that's what I've missed a lot this year. Although we stream live with a lot of them from the floor, so in a way it was a bittersweet feeling because we were really not there. We want to be there, but we were kind of there. But we didn't catch everything. I feel like being there is different.
Yeah, it's super important to be there as well. And while we weren't, some of our hosts were, and some of our friends were. We've had a few conversations. I'm really looking forward to today's with Eward Driehuis. Hopefully I pronounced your surname correctly, Eward.
It's close enough, Sean.
After all these years, I'll probably mess it up anyway. But now it's great to see you again. And sorry we missed you in person there in San Francisco. But you did a post on LinkedIn that I came across, and I found it to be very insightful. And I thought, you know what? Now's a good time to catch up with Eward and hear what he got out of RSA. And it was not just the food, not just the people, but actually some good content and topics and learning, which hopefully these conferences are about for most people anyway. So Eward, thanks for joining us. Good to have you on the show again.
Super happy to be here, Sean.
So maybe to kick things off, a few words about your role in the industry and what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah, I've been in tech and cyber for over 25 years. It might sound like a long time, and I agree, actually. It is a long time. So in the last 15 years, I've focused on cybersecurity exclusively. I worked in a bunch of organizations, and we did international business. One of them was Fox IT. We were the people that actually were able to be the first to investigate into the criminal ecosystem. We had a very good bearing on one of the first criminal groups out there doing a lot of online banking fraud. They were responsible for 80% of the fraud out there. And they were also the people who innovated a little thingy called ransomware out of their botnets. So that was an amazing time. After that, I went to work for a fantastic company. It was Europe's biggest MSP. And I got to learn the MSP business and the vendor business very well. We worked with a lot of partners, got to learn a lot of fantastic vendors, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, and what have you, all those up and coming vendors. We sold that company after a few years, and it was actually one of the biggest, it was the biggest European cybersecurity M&A at that time, and I think it still is today. And then I worked for a startup because I hadn't done that yet, just to see how that was. It was an amazing time. A company called CyberSprint. I was their strategy officer, and I worked there for 2 years. Had a lot of fun, and then I started out as an independent advisor. And I thought to myself, should try and help more companies like I did with all these three. And that's what I set out to do. On the side of that, I do have an evening job. I run a not-for-profit organization called CSIRT.global. Our aim is to chase vulnerabilities all over the internet. We find them, we locate them, and we try to find the owners. We're a sister company to the Dutch Institute for Vulnerability Disclosure. And we just started out our first chapter in the UK. I'm very proud of that. And we're trying to build a global network of incident responders chasing after vulnerability. So that's me in a nutshell.
Super cool. And I mean, I joked about the food, but I have to go with the answer that Marco gave for real, which is it's about the people. And I was fortunate enough to meet you through some mutual friends. I think it kicked off with Dimitris Lazarikis, also known as Laz, who introduced me to Andy Chandler, who I believe introduced me to you. And we probably did have some food at one of the LavaCon events, or LazCon they were called at the time. But it's these relationships and working with you and Andy, I got some insight into what was happening in Europe and with some of the criminal investigations. And I mean, really important stuff that I wouldn't have a view if I hadn't met you. So I appreciate that. And it's your view on what happened in San Francisco that we want to get into now. So we'll include a link to this post, but let's see here. Let's start with the general, how did you learn? And then we'll get into some of the what did you learn. So clearly there are sessions, but it's more than just the sessions, right? What did you do that week?
Yeah, I agree with that. It definitely took me a few years to navigate RSA properly. When I first walked in there I think it was in 2012. So that was 10 years ago. And I walked around in Moscone all starry-eyed, and I really didn't know what to do. I tried to create some kind of calendar out of the talks that were there, but that ultimately is like you said, it's not really where you probably need to be. For me, it was also meeting through mutual friends, getting into the back rooms, trying to meet new and interesting people. You never know who the next person is going to be who teaches you something. And I found that open mind is really what you need to have. And for me, what really works well is also have a little bit of an open calendar. It's very easy if you're a veteran RSA person to fully book yourself back to back with all kinds of meetings. You're probably going to be in all the hotel rooms and so on. But myself, I try to book half of my day, because if you keep that open space for maybe a lunch here or a dinner there, a cup of coffee, that's when the magic suddenly starts to happen. And for me, that was literally true as well. And then the half that I didn't plan, I had the most interesting meetings. I met a fellow named AJ Nash, who is very witty and very wise as well. I met multiple people who taught me a lot. And I borrowed it actually and put it in that post. I didn't thank them all personally, but this is all borrowed knowledge. But that's what RSA is for, in my opinion.
And that is so true. I mean, I still don't know how to navigate it. On the other hand, Sean knows exactly what to do there. I remember first time I went there was probably when you just follow the trail of the food. But I think I was there the first time when you said you were there, and Sean was just moving really fast with a full schedule ahead, and I didn't know what to do. But I agree with you. I mean, lately, the last few times we actually didn't book anything. We were just like, nope, let's just go with the flow, and then let's see what happened. And I think that's the way to do it. Kind of like to go lurk in the shadow in a way and hear what the buzz is. So why don't we start with that? I remember, Sean, in the live streams that we had, we were asking people what was the buzzword of this year, and I'm not gonna say what we heard already. I would like to hear from you. What was the main topic that you think it was relevant for real, and what was the buzzword that you didn't really want to hear?
Oh, wow. What I heard a lot of buzzwords actually. I probably heard too many of them. But yeah, that's actually one. But one of my points I am adding, we'll get there, is I know marketing is hard. I did it myself, but please, can we just stop the buzzword bingo cards? It's especially if you navigate the floor. I remember back in 2015. All those security ratings agencies, came there. Finally, if A through F is not granular enough, we introduce a risk score between 0 and 1,000. And then I came back in 2019, and they said, "Well, risk scores between 0 and 1,000 too difficult for you. Try A through F." And it's always like we're sinusing around with the same messaging and all the lessons that we learned, we forget. And okay, so let's not rant about that. But there's so many buzzwords there. I talked a lot about threat intelligence, but that can hardly be a buzzword because it's been around for so long. What I believe is that, and I said in a roundtable with CISOs. And they discussed why threat intelligence wasn't as widely adopted as it should be. And also they talked about some of the problems that they believed were underlying at the lack of adoption of threat intelligence. And it came down to some issues that still, after all these years, in their opinion, we haven't learned how to use threat intelligence properly. They jokingly said it should be actionable, like a joke, if you will. Like threat intelligence is going to be a bunch of rules that are just going to prevent stuff from happening. While in their minds, threat intelligence is really going back what it's used for, to use as tactical and strategical information you can use in your medium and long-term decision making. And that part of threat intelligence isn't used so much. So
and is that so? The long-term decision making, is that in how is it just inside cybersecurity or the InfoSec team? What tools they select, the processes they deploy, the teams they build, or does it go beyond that into how the business actually defines the products it develops and the services it provides? Or what was the context of those thoughts?
Yeah, so it was. So we talked about, for example, if you're talking about threat intelligence, one of the things that is always going to be pushed forward is just the IOC feeds, right? So the feeds of actionable information that that is really looking back in the past at what's already happened. And because it's happened at someone else, you can now leverage that information so you can try and prevent it happening to you. Again, that is, those feeds, while they are, have uses, they are always looking backwards, right? So it's not a tool that you use in your decision making. It's not guaranteeing anything that will happen tomorrow or next week or next month or next year. And for that, I think threat intelligence, as we discussed it, is not, I don't know, simple to use, if you will, because you need to put your work in. You can't just digest it and put it into a system and have it put into firewalls automatically. But tactical strategical intelligence is for you and your team to crunch and to think about and to formulate opinions on and to embed into your operations. And that stuff isn't done that much if I read the CISOs that I talk to correctly.
And I know one more point on this before Marco moves on to the next topic or bullet. You noted the SEC notification because you talked about kind of rearview mirror look, and that's kind of what this is as well, the SEC notification. So what were the thoughts on that, if you have any to share?
Yeah. So one of those, one of the guidelines from the SEC, of course, states that for larger companies, enterprises, threat intelligence should be mandatory, which I think is seen as a good thing, and might be a good step into further adoption. Those who don't use it at all. But again, the fear is, well, if you just use, let's say, the IOC feeds part of just the operational threat intelligence, it will not steer you and your security organization in any future-proof directions. So you can still, even if you're forced to use TI, you can still use it too myopically, and it will not present that value to your organization. But all in all, it's always good that the adoption will be bigger due to the SEC regulations.
So maybe not a direct connection to this next point, but it's around DevOps and DevSecOps and AppSec. And clearly we've been trying for years to integrate, right, security into application development and find ways to build knowledge and information into that whole process so teams can either collaborate or teams can either own the start to finish life cycle that includes security. What was your takeaway from RSA in terms of AppSec and DevSecOps and that whole space?
Yeah, I thought those were some of the most interesting developments, especially on the product and on the vendor field. And I must tell you immediately, like, because of the whole pandemic situation, I hadn't been to RSA for 2 years, so a lot has happened in 2 years. I know we didn't talk about this stuff 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, but today, if you're talking about the dev process, and again, all of this knowledge is borrowed by people smarter than myself, but they see a trend where devs have an increasingly bigger responsibility over their own efforts as a little shop delivering code. And that means that there is a trend going on that includes, the delivery of the code, includes QA, includes security, all kinds of AppSec checks and balances. And there's a lot of new products and vendors out there that are playing into that trend. But they allow devs to spin up instances of those tools, performing those extra services on their own little shop of delivering code that can very easily be onboarded. They can be used by that dev after a while. Maybe 5 or 10 devs use it in a team. and that might be a good time for an enterprise account manager to give your organization a little call, because they see, hey, 10 of your devs are using this. And I think, that's where both the trending in development and a new business model that is, well, I was told by a gentleman that was a CMO at Palo Alto, was René Bonveny. He's actually a fellow Dutchman, has been living there for decades now. That process called product-led growth. And that is a methodology that he believes in very strongly. So, because that allows, let's say, the shopkeeper themselves to use the product without any sales or enterprise or whatever interfering, and only after the product is widely adopted, because it has a lot of uses. It's targeted at the dev. It's not targeted at the dev's manager. It's not targeted at the procurement process and so on. So you bypass all of that. And he really believes in that. So I talked about it with some other sales leaders as well, by the way, more traditional sales leadership, who are used to doing those enterprise sales and just chasing down people, showing the value and so on. And they believe, well, in the end, if those 10 devs are going to use that product, you need to have a discussion with a salesman anyway, because that's when you want to have your volume license or whatever. And that's where your procurement comes in. That's where your compliance officer comes in, and so on and so on. So in the end, an enterprise sale is going to happen. So what they seem to think is, well, this PLG might be a very nice first step to accelerate entry into an organization, but it's going to require traditional sales to make the sale bigger, if you will. That's what they seem to think.
Nice. I'm going to bring you back to other kind of business, which is the merging and acquisition. You have a point about that, and how you're talking about that the cybersecurity industry company valuation kind of dropped. And of course, first thought is, well, sure, look at the economy, right? So number one. But also, I think maybe that connect to the fact that we need to leave this industry and invest in this business independently if it's a speculation or not. Meaning, are we at the point where actually we all agree that there is a great value for the business, and so it's a long-term investment for society as well? So just to maybe elaborate on that point.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Marco. I would say it's too simple to just say, well, interest is going up, so money is getting more expensive. That would be a gross oversimplification, right? There's a lot of investment firms who still sit on a lot of money, and they need to have that money rolling around in order to do something for them. So I think the consensus is that there's still a lot of money out there for who's actually looking for it. And again, the word on the streets, this is just some numbers that have been whispered into my ear, that there's about a 20% valuation drop. This is total speculation, of course, because I haven't seen anyone doing the math. How can you compare today's valuations to last year's valuation or last decade's valuations? But that said, all of this investing is, of course, about feeling. It's about a gut feeling as well. And if the word on the streets is that cybersecurity value is dropping, interest rates are rising, then indeed investing in it, for a short-term big exit might be a little bit too opportunistic at this time. But long-term investments and investors who are willing to stick with an organization and willing to help them over many years to get further, that's absolutely fine. That's a-okay. So from that I got the feeling that the chance that we'll see some wild and bumpy rides, in 3 years from a 5 million seat to becoming a unicorn is deemed a little bit less likely. But in the long term, for those that require long-term relations with their investors, nothing really changes.
I don't know if you got a sense of this or not, but so clearly investments help either create or extend a runway, right? So that there's some sort of exit. If the runway is short, almost too short in some cases, perhaps, does that drive the likelihood of M&A? And I know that there's been a lot of talk of there's so many companies doing very similar or the same thing, so we have to see some consolidation anyway. Did you get a sense that those two things are going to drive a lot of acquisitions?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I did see World in use from my own vantage point, and again, this there's absolutely no statistics behind this, but I did see some very interesting startups who have been acquired in order to be features of bigger companies and bigger products. And I do believe if you're a bigger company and you're lacking certain functionality, that they at this time would be scouting out those kinds of organizations to buy themselves into that kind of technology to include it into their platforms. I have seen that happening, but that's not a proof that it is a trend now, of course. But also, of course, and this is for me as a European, this might sound really, I don't mean this in a negative way or something, but it's very, let's say, putting in a lot of investments with a B round and a C rounds and investments of over several hundred of million is something that in Europe doesn't happen a lot. And in Europe, actually, is you see a situation more often where a company is actually earning money. So they're not losing money anymore on a monthly basis, but they're actually earning money from sales at a very early stage in their growth paths. It might be interesting, and I know that when you're used to looking at big investments and so on, maybe there might be one or two lessons to learn from some of the more successful European startups that became solvent very fast. Because I believe that there might be some kind of truth in the middle. Those big investments might be risky, but becoming cash positive too soon might be a risky approach as well. So somewhere in between those two strategies might be something interesting.
Something in between. It's always usually that's where the answer is, right in between.
A hot dog or a hamburger, something in between.
Well, I was going more like a shade of gray between the black and white, but
I go
sure.
with the
Well, you can go with the buns example too.
I go with the pancake between two pancakes.
Yeah. And how you package that pancake or burger, that is important. That makes me think about the branding, the marketing. And we kind of touched already on this. Like when I say buzzwords, I know that usually don't come from the industry itself. It comes from those that are paid to market the industry. And you have a couple of points here that even if I wasn't there, I kind of have those flashback of getting into San Francisco, they're seeing like billboard, or getting into the expo floor and seeing a finger pointed at you that say you're not good at doing this, let us do it. So that kind of fear mongering is still there, despite all the conversation, I guess, Sean, that we had in the past, where we're not that relevant, we're not that effective into changing the course.
Right, and it's more than just the words, right, Eward?
I agree.
It's a way of presenting, I guess. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. I agree. I do believe that for some reason we still haven't found the right words to explain how you become more secure and safe. right? And for some reason, the old paradigms, the castle with the moat around it and the bridge and everything, of course, security professionals laugh about that. We're still talking, we're marketing our products like you're protecting a castle. So, for example, if you're protecting yourself against ransomware, what they will say is, listen, if you fail to protect yourself against ransomware, that means that your organization will be ransomed. You might be going bankrupt and all of your customer data is out there. And that's what you want to prevent. You want to make sure that and that is a very tricky proposition, because on the other hand, the same vendors are saying, well, 100% protection is impossible. Everyone knows that you can do your best, but in the end they will get in. So you need detection. You need your NDR, your XDR, your SOC, because you want to make sure if they are in your castle that you detect them. So we're giving them two messages. You need to prevent being hit with ransomware at all costs. And secondly, you can't do it. So buy this expensive NDR, XDR product so you can at least maybe see the criminals walking in your castle. And why we haven't talked about more reasonable analogies, like, for example, talking about health, right? How do you, so let's talk about, not about ransomware like it is a break-in. Let's talk about ransomware like it is a health incident. Let's just say, and I mean nothing by it, I know many people who have suffered this, but let's just say, let's talk heart attack, right? It's horrible, you don't want it. I sincerely hope no one will have it, but how do you prevent that? It's going to the gym, right? It's eating healthy, it's sleeping well, it's hydrating, that kind of stuff. It's stuff you have control on, right? And we need to be talking about, because then we can start to share the message. We can do this. You can be in charge of your own destiny. No one can guarantee that you won't have it, but we can scientifically show you that your chances of being hit with such an event will become less and less and less. And this is how you need to do it. And this is how we can help. We can be your personal trainer. We can buy you technology like this wonderful drinking bottle, which has some light on it when I don't drink it, and so on and so on.
Nice.
Right?
I think I have that same bottle.
Yeah. And why we don't find these more positive angles to talk about cybersecurity, I don't know. But we don't.
I could go with this for a long time, and actually, I want to suggest, Sean, that we do an episode about that, because I have a lot of analogy with how the general advertising industry used to present the problem and sell back in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and how now things have changed. And the fact that you run this parallel between the conversation that we hear, and that's true. I mean, Sean and I, we hear what you just said. We know there's not the castle. Nobody talk about castle and preventing 100%. But then you go to the floor, and that's what you see. You go to the website, and that's what you see. So great point that I want to dig into for sure. Sean, we'll catch your attention here on
we'll
the
sandwich
list.
That between two other episodes.
And a nice packaging with some golden arches, maybe.
Exactly. And at risk of being negative here with this next point, cyber law. And I guess there's some positive news here. So we touched on the SEC stuff. I don't know if and you noted some European law activity as well. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but then also white hat hackers and some precedents there, and obviously you're with your foundation. That's a very important topic for you, right? Being able to share information and not get slammed for it.
Yeah. Now for us that was very big news because it's even something rather benign, and something that happens 10 times every minute. It's like the entire internet gets scanned by white hats, by black hats, by gray hats, whatever color hats. Everybody scans the entire internet because there are vulnerabilities. We want to find them. We scan RDP ports and so on. But something, what you could use for benign purposes is criminalized in many countries. Right? Something like scanning. Some countries think about that stuff in a, let's say, in a modern way. They compare it maybe if you talk about a house and about a break-in. Well, if you just walk on the street and see your windows open, they think in terms of scanning might be something like that, and then informing someone that the window's open, not going in the window, not seeing what is behind the window, but just looking. Hey, there's a window open. Maybe you should close it. That's already illegal in some jurisdictions, and that makes stuff difficult. So when that the news about white hat hackers in the US no longer at risk of facing charges is to us is very important, because of course white hat hackers were always at risk, if you will, in the US, depending on who would read the message. If it were a modern person working for a modern forward-thinking CISO, they would probably be okay. But if it would be someone, let's say, living a little bit more in the past, you could be at risk of being indicted. So that now is probably the risk is now probably less. It's not zero, mind you, but that's very good news, especially for my foundation. And also, I think it's really important that from a lawful perspective, globally, we understand there's a difference between walking on the street and seeing there's a window open and informing someone, than climbing into the window and grabbing a bunch of papers that you find somewhere on a table and then waving it in someone's face. There's a difference. And that's what I think we should recognize in law as well. The lawmakers should be a little bit wary of that. There's differences in that regard. And well, the SEC news was, of course, that was big news as well. Like the CISOs I talked to, they rejoiced at probably a wider adoption of TI, of course, as we discussed. There is in the breach notification law, there's a mention of 4 days. And also, this is interesting, again, from a European perspective, is in Europe, mind you, we have 3 days. So we need to work a little bit faster, if you will, to get all of our facts straight, to a little bit initial forensics and so on. But also in Europe, within those first 3 days, we should inform all the downstream victims. And this is something that was, for me, was a big takeaway from RSA. The SEC doesn't have that requirement. Right? So law
No
in
downstream.
the US, yeah, exactly. It's way easier to comply. Just get your facts straight. You have 4 days, and then you inform the SEC probably after 3 days and 21 hours with some of the initial knowledge you gathered. In Europe, after 3 days, you should have informed all of your customers. If you have 2 million of them, you should have sent 2 million emails. Right, so it's that simple, and that is interesting. I believe. I believe it's good that the SEC is pushing that breach notification law. I also think if you're finding difficulty to comply with that law, try to phone up a European friend who works in InfoSec. See how they do it.
They do it in 3 days, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, as we get close to the end, there's one bullet left, and it's kind of connected to the public sector, and certainly if you look at standards developed by government entities like NIST, which you include in the bullet. Was NIST and other frameworks and standards really part of the conversation? How top of mind were those for folks? Things like MITRE, on a MITRE attack come up?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, MITRE attack is still so popular, and it's. I heard MITRE attack. I heard them probably more being discussed than NIST. If I'm honest, of course, they have a totally different purpose. They're not comparable. But the interesting thing is that I got to talk to a few people from NIST, and this is why I entered that as a little fact. They were working on the new version, and I think that is wonderful news because I know many people who use the NIST framework as a framework of reference for their own way that they implement security in their organizations. So I also know a lot of vendors offer some kind of mapping to, for example, to MITRE, but also to NIST. So for all of those, that's relevant because they will be mapping to a slightly newer version of that. But also, what new things have they thought about? All of that stuff to me is really interesting.
All right, Sean, I think we're almost at the end, but one more question, if you allow me.
Always one more. I'll let you have one, Marco. You never let me, but I'll let you have one.
It's more of a way, thank you. It's more of a way to wrap these. It's and kind of pointing to, oftentimes you've made reference between here in Europe, where you are right now, and the United States. And I'm going to put in there every other country in the world, but of course, easier to compare Europe and United States. Do you feel like that if you were going to do a report like call a report like an informal report of your perspective and experience at RSA Conference, and you were going to do it about maybe some events or how you feel about what's going on in the old country there, what's the biggest difference in your opinion, and what we can learn from each other?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question, and as far as I can see, and again, this is my personal opinion, I'm going to give some kudos to the US because in many fields, many parts of InfoSec, they seem to be ahead of Europe. That's what I believe, but not in every single one. There are some subtle differences, and for example, one of the biggest differences I think you can find in anti-fraud. And there's a very simple reason for that. And I asked this as a trick question to some of these CISOs. So why do you believe that the anti-fraud in Europe and in the US is so vastly different? Because it is. And they said, well, I don't know. Is it because of GDPR? Is it? No, it's not. It's because of the SEPA system, the Single European Payments Area, which is a real-time international transaction system, which means that if I wire $10,000 from the Netherlands to Poland, within 3 seconds, it's arrived at a new destination. So that means that anti-fraud is real-time in Europe, needs to be real-time in Europe. You need to be making decisions in seconds, in milliseconds, rather than in days. And that's, for example, where a lot of the anti-fraud within the US is still based upon, is that the fact that they have a lot of time to make their decisions. So these are some of the subtle differences, right, where they could learn a little bit from Europe, maybe. Of course, privacy is perceived differently in Europe, right? So that's a difference. And there are more differences. But I would say that over the whole, the US is ahead of Europe in many fields, except for a bunch.
Except for the one that are not.
Ahead and different, except for many where the other many are different.
Exactly.
There you go.
I love that. And I couldn't help but think about the crypto blockchain conversation we had the other day, Marco, about just the need for real-time, quick decision-making on transactions and verifying the integrity of that information. And it sounds like this payment system is very similar to that, but probably not on the blockchain nonetheless. But anyway, interesting conversation we had. I think that'll be out shortly for those who want to listen to that. But right now, I want to thank Eward for joining us today. And tons of information here, lots of points. I'm happy that you were able to take some time to walk through each of them with us. adding some color to the points in the post. Of course, for those listening, we'll link to the post, which will then obviously link you to Eward, and feel free to connect with him, of course. And anything else that we think is interesting, we'll include in the show notes here. Of course, stay tuned for all of our coverage. This is the last of this for RSA Conference, ITSPmagazine.com/RSAC, everything that we discussed before, during, and after the event. And of course, we're kicking off our Black Hat DEF CON coverage as well. So be sure to find that and follow us on our journey to Las Vegas. So, Eward, thank you again. Marco, it's time for some pancakes.
There you go. Thank you, Eward.
Thank you so much.
AppViewX is trusted by the world's leading global organizations to reduce risk, ensure compliance, and increase visibility through machine identity management and application infrastructure security and orchestration. Learn more at appviewx.com. Modern application development needs modern application security. With our award-winning application security testing solutions, Checkmarx enables developers to securely accelerate their work. Learn more at checkmarx.com.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
CrowdSec, the collaborative and open source cybersecurity solution. Analyze behaviors, respond to attacks, and share signals across the community for free. Let's make the internet safer together. Learn more at crowdsec.net. HITRUST is a leading data protection standards development and certification organization that strives to safeguard sensitive information and manage information risk for global organizations across all industries and throughout the third-party supply chain. Learn more at hightrustalliance.net.
Blue Lava is the first business platform for CISOs to manage their security program. Blue Lava guides security leaders to effectively measure, optimize, and communicate their security program with confidence and ease in one platform. Learn more at bluelava.net.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share ITSP Magazine with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our columns. Thank you for listening.